hoodie, but that didn't help.
I'll be offered to keep those plans, throw out, if I don't know about it, it'll bother me.
No.
Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Brian.
Well, you're never cold, Mr. Brian. All righty. If you open up to Proverbs 1, that's where we're going to be today. Proverbs chapter 1. Talking to him back there, huh?
I can enlarge this so I can read it.
So we're going to get, today we're going to try to cover kind of two sections here in Proverbs 1. And they'll also serve as sort of two examples of what we find in this first 9 chapters of Proverbs. And so we'll have one section here that will be one of these sections where the father is speaking to his son and kind of, an encouragement to wisdom. And then we'll also get one of these poems or this figure of wisdom crying out, begging people to come to her and receive the benefits of her wisdom. And so hopefully we'll get to both of those here today. Let's have a word of prayer then. Dear Lord God, we come to you this day and we are thankful for all of your goodness towards us. We ask, God, that you would bless us as we open your word, that indeed through it we might become wiser, wise in the sense of fearing you and knowing your Son, but also wise in the sense of how we conduct our daily lives. We ask that you would bless our study now. We ask it in Christ's holy name. All right. So last time, if you remember, we did kind of those first 7 verses, right, which just sort of, told us that the purpose of wisdom, right, to grow people that are simple in wisdom, then to take that wisdom and put it into wise dealings in our life, and then to go back and try to learn more wisdom, right? And that this is kind of the cycle is throughout our life, we're always trying to become wiser in the ways of the Lord, and not just to know it, but to do it, right? So that's kind of what we had in those first 7 verses. So today, like I said, we're going to try to kind of finish this chapter here. And again, with these Proverbs, I want to really kind of, read the text, and then let's have a little discussion. And then if there are specific questions about specific words or concepts in there, we'll kind of do that last rather than kind of front loading with a bunch of information. Let's let the wisdom, right? Let's ruminate on that a little bit, and then we'll come back. If somebody would read this first kind of section or part of it, we're going to go 8 through 19, and I'd like to just have us read it all. So if someone's willing to read the whole thing or otherwise read part, and then tap a neighbor and tell them to keep going.
Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They will be a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not give in to them. If they say, come along with us, let's lie in wait for some with blood. Let's waylay some harmless soul. Let's swallow them alive like the grave, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We will get all sorts of valuable things and fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot with us, and we will share a common purse. My son, do not go along with them. Do not set foot on their paths, for their feet rush into sin. They are swift to shed blood. How useless to spread net in full view of all the birds. These men lie in wait for their own blood. They waylay only themselves. Such is the end of all who go after ill-gotten gain. It takes away the lives of those who get it.
All right. So I'm going to throw it to you first. What's wisdom you hear in there? Whether it's, whether you want to try to shoot for kind of the overall or a specific thing you see somewhere. What?
Don't go along with people who are going to do wrong.
Okay.
be careful who you associate with.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Which requires us to judge people's behavior.
Okay. So we've got to kind of know who we're dealing with, right? And what their character, their way of life is. Because we want to make sure that we're not sort of being swept up, or put, in the middle of the proverb here, that we're not walking on their path or even putting our foot on it, right? He goes as far as to say, kind of, it's almost like, don't walk don't, someone might go, well, I won't walk, I'll just go over there and look like you. No, don't even put your foot on that path, right? Okay, so, right, this is what we might with when we think of young people here, we might talk about peer pressure, right? And we all know there's none of that once you're an adult, right?
Right.
But yeah, there's this general idea here. Well, I guess I'll say it this way. So we know that we're not, right? The wisdom is don't walk with them, don't get in that group. But why not? Or let's start here. Why would you? I mean, do you want to go associate with evil people? It seems like most people would say, no, I don't think so.
To fit
But
in.
why? Okay, maybe to fit in, right? So wide is the road that leads to destruction, right? And so, yeah, there's sometimes just a sense of this is what everybody else is doing. And maybe at times that's sort of the easiest way we do fall into these things, right? And maybe especially as we become adults, right? We just sort of accept certain practices, maybe just because it seems like everybody else is doing it, and that's what people say you should do. So we kind of do that. Okay. Why else would we?
It's kind of, in my mind, the way sin entices us to,
Okay.
like we're missing out on something if
Right.
we don't do it.
Yeah. Right.
And that I think we all struggle with that, but in varying degrees.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. And so, yeah, there's this wisdom to know, of course, that typically the evil one does not show up with pitchfork and horns, right? He shows up by saying, hey, here's a way to make some money quick, right? Or here's, again, this deals mostly with greed. That's why I went there first. But it could be, right? Here's something that'll make you feel good if you eat it, taste it, touch it, whatever. So sin always entices, and it always entices the lusts of our flesh. Right? And again, like you said, we've all got those, right? And so, again, some are completely given over to those things at a particular point in their life, right? And I mean, to the point of addiction, right? We might say, where it's just like, see it, they got to have it, right? That they become so kind of accustomed to it that way. For others, right, it might be on the other end that, God is, we're walking with God and He is keeping us pure. And so we see those things and they tempt us just for a moment, right? And then probably most of the time we're somewhere in between those two, right? But yeah, we want to, again, it is wisdom to know that evil generally does not look like evil on the surface. Right? And that's something we kind of have to keep always thinking, right? Is, okay, this sounds good. This sounds like it might lead to good, but is it good? Right? And again, sometimes the answer might be, yeah, that's fine. Right? This is a good way to walk. This is wisdom that we can walk in. And other times we may go, wait a second. Wait, how are they getting this money? What's there? Yeah.
Well, I think it all goes down to coveting. And there's an old saying that whoever has the most toys wins.
Right.
And so if you can get things without working for them.
Yeah. Right. And here
That's what probably half of the prisons are filled with is people that wanted to get something the easy way, what they thought was the easy way,
yep.
without working for it.
Right. No, very good.
And for young people too, they can go do something with these supposed friends and just be in the wrong place at the wrong time
Okay,
and get into trouble.
right. Yeah,
I
right.
mean, they didn't think that they would be getting into trouble, but they do get into trouble.
Right. So I think to me, that's that point of like, don't even put your foot on this path, right? Because it's easy at times too to say like, well, I'm gonna walk with these people this far, but I would never go to where they're going. Right. So like, oh yeah, thought of easy gain and all of that. But then, when you hear them start plotting, I mean, here they're pretty forthright in this proverb, right? Let's go basically take stuff from other people, and if we need to, violently so, right? To get this quick gain. Now, again, we think, well, I could never end up there, right? But right, there was one Supreme Court justice, right, that always I can't remember who it was, to be honest, but would look down from his office and kind of see the prisoners walking by and say, "There, but by the grace of God go I." Do you know this quote or not? Yeah, okay, yeah. But I mean, just kind of to get that idea that the difference between being the Supreme Court judge or being the prisoner, we would like to believe that's way far apart. And again, in certain senses, maybe, but really it comes down to a few decisions made in a row, right? And again, that's why there's kind of this idea that if you know someone's evil, don't even go with them part of the way, right? Don't overestimate.
I'm reading a book right now on the outlaws, the gang outlaws of the late 1800s, Jesse James.
Yeah.
And how easy it was for people to fall into
Yeah.
those, and especially the one family, their brother talked their brothers into doing bad things all the time.
Yeah.
None of them like to work. They
Yeah.
want the easy way.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
My elementary school PE teacher became a detective with the Wichita Police Department.
Okay.
And he has since passed away, but I met him several years ago, and he was a devout Christian, devout Catholic, actually. And one of the things he said is, and this is what this chapter reminds me so much of, how so many of the murders they would work, especially the gangs, the intention was to go either scare somebody or perhaps steal something.
Right.
And it ended up in murder. And he said, and you might have 2 or 3 people tagging along because they didn't want to not fit in.
Yeah.
And, then all of a sudden things got out of hand, something happened, and now they're all accessories to murder. And he said there were so many of those kids, he said, that they would sit there and interview them. He said, I'd walk out of there almost wanting to cry for these kids because they just put themselves in such a terrible place, and now they're 30 years to life in prison.
Yeah. Right.
For something that they never intended to.
Right.
And he says some of them weren't bad kids either.
Right.
They just made a terrible decision at a
Yeah.
terrible time.
Right. And again, we see this too, right, with this idea of just wanting somewhere to belong, right? I think there's a little bit of this wisdom here, is that, these guys are saying, come hang with us, right? Come do what we're doing. And again, this is one of those times where especially people that don't feel like they have a gang, not here in the small g, I don't know, but a brotherhood, a sisterhood, or mix there of people that kind of a support system, right? They're particularly susceptible to that, right? Because it's all right, I want to be a part of something. Right? And that's where, like, one thing I think we always need to do a better job of reminding people that the church, and particularly a local congregation, is such a place to find that need fulfilled, right? That their church isn't. This is why I kind of get frustrated with all this sort of, for a while, it's all Jesus and me, and I don't need the church, I don't need any of this, right? And part of what that did, again, is it made people susceptible to other groups. So I'm not going to church, right? But I'm going off partially on my own, but then also I find some random person on the internet that's saying just what I wish they would say, right? And now all of a sudden I'm in a group on the internet, and that's sort of my support group, and that's can be problematic there. Okay. At the end, there's this kind of neat little metaphor, if you will. He basically says, you can't just put a net out right in front of a bird, right? Even a bird will fly around the net, at least most. I don't know, you guys, correct. Well, you wouldn't be correcting me, you'd be correcting Solomon. So go ahead and try it. No. But in general, the point is, you put something in plain vision, people are not going to be caught by it. And yet Solomon says they're really setting up their own destruction right in front of their own eyes, right? And then they're flying into it. Right? They should know these things that they're doing are dangerous, are perilous, but they don't. And next thing you know, they're caught kind of in their own trap, right? Let's look at verse 19 just for a second here to think on this one a little bit, right? Because I think the rest of the language of this is so, again, I don't know if violent is the right word, but, swallow them alive, plunder them, all these kind of ideas. But somebody read verse 19 out loud for us again. Let's think on that for a little bit.
Such are the paths of all who go after ill-gotten gain.
All right. And the next one, is there the end of that verse?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're
Take
good.
away the life of those who get it.
All right. Think about, there's kind of two parts of wisdom there, right? One is just this idea where I think this is kind of expanded, right? Any ungot or ill-gotten gain. That's a pretty broad category, right? I mean, this is when we teach the commandments, and you say you shall not steal, and people go, "Oh, okay, I did good. I didn't like go into Dylan's and take a turkey out and carry it out behind my back or something like that out of the store, so I'm good, right?" One of the things the large catechism that goes to the small catechism is good at is fleshing this out into real life, right? Interesting. One of the things Luther really says about that commandment is he goes hard on farmers there, people with livestock, and he says, here's an opportunity to steal all day long, right? To present your livestock as better than they actually are, right? He says you're stealing from your neighbor when you do that. We might say, right, you're selling whatever. A car, I guess we just had garage sales, so maybe somebody knows that, their TV, you turn it on, it works for 5 minutes and then it flickers off, right? Or whatever. And you're selling somebody and say, oh yeah, it works, turns on great, and again, it might only be that you're getting $20 for it. But is that ill-gotten gain? Yeah. Other examples from you guys. What's a common temptation to ill-gotten gain? Okay. Say a little more there.
You'll do something that you know is wrong just to have people praise you.
Okay. Right. So we might have again that, and again, whether this is something just as simple as, people are just saying, well, present yourself this way, or could be dressed this way, and more people will, follow you or whatever. Yeah, I think that's a good category there, where someone kind of says, if you walk in these ways, we can promise you this money. Right?
It's been a lot of years ago, but the superintendent of high school, Marvin Stark, told Ralph one day, he said, Lene is a really good leader, but she's a leader in a good way. And I thought, hey, we must have done something right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, again, sometimes these gangs will have an initiation thing, for someone who wants
Okay.
to be in the gang.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll say, okay, go steal
Okay.
whatever,
Right.
And again, it's just so that they can belong to something.
Right. And again, to lesser degrees, there can be that sort of, even in jobs and things, right? There can be almost some sort of test of loyalty where they're going to ask you to do something that they know is not quite right just to see if you're going to do what you should do or what they want you to do always, right? And they kind of throw something out that's not what you should do and say, go get this done, right? And you go, I don't really want to do that, but I guess I have to. Right? And all of a sudden your foot's on the path. And yeah, maybe, again, that ends up being of gain to you, but it started with this dishonesty. Right. Okay.
You
Yeah.
know,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
when paying for something with cash, which not many people do anymore.
Right.
You know, let's say you gave somebody a $20 bill and bought, say, $6 worth,
Right.
and they gave you the change back. But let's say that you thought you gave them a $10 bill,
Right.
and if they give you all this extra change back,
Yeah. Huh?
I look at that verse 19 and I look at it and I think, follow the devil and you'll end up in hell. I mean, that's what that's really
Okay.
saying.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But and again, just to go back to Dwayne's thing too, because I think it's important when we're looking at this wisdom that we do get it down to kind of the basis level, right? These interactions we might have on any day where we recognize, yeah, for whatever reason, we come out of the store and we say, wait a second, I got more, or they didn't charge me for this, right? Or they didn't charge me for that.
I can give you a personal example.
Okay.
You know, we usually shop at Dillon's, but I usually use the self-checkout.
Yeah.
And one day I thought I bought 1 pound of bacon and got home and there were 2.
Okay.
Well, I had only paid for 1.
Yeah. Right.
And so I took it back and said, you know, I need to pay you for this because, you know, they were stuck together and
Yeah.
I didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And they kind of looked at me like I lost my marbles.
Yeah. Right. It's kind of so uncommon, right? That someone would, just do that. I mean,
Well,
Yeah.
I said, you know, that's what's right. I mean,
yeah.
the other was not right.
If you're going to raise heck about getting shortchanged, don't.
Yeah. Shortchange somebody else.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah. Right.
Well, you wouldn't think anything of going back to the store if you had bought 1 and got charged for 2. You'd go back to the store. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Right. No, exactly. Right. And so, yeah. And again, the point of this is, you know, as we do this work in Proverbs is keep thinking about this stuff, right? Because, I mean, that, you know, you always have to change sort of your 10 Commandments teaching with kids because things change. So like when I was growing up more, the big thing was stealing music, movies, things like that on the internet. You know, you could, and again, it didn't seem like stealing because you just log on to this server and, oh, there's that movie. You download it, you could watch it. Right? But is that ill-gotten gain? Yeah. Did you pay for it? No. Right? And again, sometimes it's so easy to justify that stuff, right? Oh, they're a multi-million-dollar film company. They're not. I wasn't going to buy the DVD anyway, so they didn't lose any money anyway. Right? We do all these kind of things, right? And some of it too is just, you know, there's always a close thing here as far as, you know, say loopholes in legal things, right? It's okay to follow the law, but also there are times where, again, you can sort of exploit the law or exploit someone at the cost of the law, right? And we want to again say, all right, am I loving my neighbor if I do this or not, right? This way, where it's, you know, and again, you know, it may not be the gang, it might be your financial advisor, not the gang leader, but you know, the guy down at the local financial store that says, oh yeah, if you just do this, that'll be good. And you're like, can you really do that? Well, you probably won't get caught, you know. Okay. So we want to be thinking through those things. But that last part, right? It takes away the life of its possessors. And like Doug said, ultimately, not just this life, but eternal life. And the only other thing I'd add there, not just eternal life, but this life. Because again, I'm convinced we got a lot of people in our world that at least at their conscious level, you say, you're going to go to hell if you do that. They go, that exists. So that's not a real thing. But if you say to them, you're going to ruin your own life here now, right? You're going to end up with all sorts of trouble. You're always going to have to watch your back because of all the lies you told, wondering if this is ever going to catch up to you, right? Or you're going to have to worry that that money that you took from your mom, right? Because you were handling her money. You're always, that's always going to be on your conscience, whatever it is. And certainly, right? Does that stuff happen? Family members taking money from other family members? I know I hear stories of that pretty often, right? So in whatever way, but to say, I mean, it's kind of interesting how it's worded here. It's the gain takes away the life of the one that owns it, right? So it's almost like that very stuff that you got is then the stuff that kind of eats away at you. Okay?
Well, and it should, shouldn't it? I mean, if you take something
Yeah.
that doesn't belong to you, that should bother you.
Right.
And it should eat at your conscience
Yeah.
if you have a conscience.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let's go to the first part of the just there. Just this is, it's interesting here. It starts off, and there are other places in the book of Proverbs where you just see son, and you could think, well, is this just the wise man, the scribe teaching his pupils, right? Is that what we mean by son here, right? I don't know that we do that as much anymore in our culture, but certainly throughout history, people would do that, right? I mean, Paul calls Timothy his spiritual son, right? This is things like this. Someone that you taught, that you mentored, kind of, I don't know, do we have a word other than mentor and mentee? I don't know, but that kind of idea. But here we get pretty clear that this is literal son, right? Why? Why do we know this is literal son? Here, what? Hey, verse 8. Hear your father's
instruction and do not forsake your mother's teaching.
Right. Now, again, I don't want to push too hard on this too, but I don't think this is unintentional here, that the father is mentioned with discipline and the mother is mentioned with teaching. Right? Now, this is not to say that mothers don't discipline or fathers don't teach, but it shows that there are different ways to lead people in wisdom. Right? Sometimes you're teaching beforehand, right? Your kid comes and they're going to their first party out with other kids, right? And you pull them aside maybe and you say, all right, here's some things, right? If you get in this situation, do this. If, I know you told me you're not drinking, but if you end up drinking, call me, right? Whatever it is, you can do some teaching beforehand, right? And that leads a person in the way of wisdom. But also, there can be the time where you didn't do that, or even you did, and they do the wrong thing. And then you can teach also on the other end with discipline, right? With a punishment that's meant to instruct. And again, this is in our world. I mean, really in our world, kind of both of these are sort of looked down upon, right? You're not really supposed to teach anyone else anything that would impose upon what they want to do, right? That's kind of a bad deal. But you for sure don't discipline someone because they did something wrong, right? And we ask, how's that going for our culture, right? That been yielding good fruit? Doug, did you have something?
My mother tells me a story of when I was younger. I took a candy bar from the grocery store.
Okay.
I was eating it. We got outside and my mother said, "Where did you get that?"
Yeah.
I said, "In the store." She took me back in the store. She gave me a nickel to pay her candy bar.
Yeah.
And I thought, fine, I'll take it. I didn't get the rest of the candy bar.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There's discipline, right, on the backside. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And this is a passage you really could kind of do a nice, kind of parenting kind of idea here about how do you teach your children the things that you want. And we all know, anyone who's had children, right, knows we're not saying this makes it easy or silver bullet, but the other thing is that we can just despair and give up trying to parent, right? Because the thing we did last didn't seem to work at all, right? And this twofold idea of of teaching in advance and maybe after too, but teaching and discipline as two ways to lead people in the right ways. And I don't know. Tell me what you think. I think it's probably right that fathers end up, or at least used to end up, teaching more with discipline, and mothers tended to teach more with teaching. You think that's true or not?
It used to be that way. I don't
Yeah.
know for sure now if it is. I mean, I
Right.
don't know, but I used to be that way.
Yeah. And I'm just saying, I think this is written this way to point that out. And again, not to say again that, it'd be wrong for the dad to sit his kid down, right, before going somewhere and say that. Part of it may just be, again, of course, just, depending on how the family's ordered and things like that, right, that there's, if the mother is at home or something, that she has more time to do that teaching, right? And, it used to be that old, right, wait till your dad gets home thing, right? That's the discipline of the father thing, right? And again, that discipline can be all sorts of things. Like I said, it can be to remove something you wanted, right? But again, the Proverbs will make clear that part of parenting is discipline. And that if you don't discipline your children, it's bad for your children, it's bad for you, it's bad for the culture, it's bad for their neighbors that are going to live with them, right? So it's not easy, but it's needed. Yeah, and their instruction and their teaching, right? Maybe not in the moment, doesn't feel like a graceful garland around the head, kind of a bridal, the flowers all over, all of the bridal. What's that called? That thing you put on top of your head? Veil, I guess. Yeah, but sometimes they have flowers. Yeah. So think of it like that, or pendants for your necklace. This is kind of when the Bible talks about God's word being more precious than gold or silver, right? Very similar idea here. All right. Anything else there in those verses that jumps out at you?
I've had several, and these were middle-aged men tell me, it isn't wrong unless you get caught.
Yeah. Right.
I think that's kind of a current day thought in the world.
Yeah, and I think, some of this wisdom teaches us to not only argue like, well, you can't say that just because it's wrong, right? But like, at times I think we need to go ahead, see how that goes for you. Keep doing things that are unjust your whole life and see how that goes. Now, again, that doesn't mean they might not gain from it. So they may be the wealthiest person in town, but are they going to be content? Are they going to be at peace? No, and I think sometimes it's okay to say that. That's kind of, I always think with like young people, when we talk about kind of traditional idea of dating and marriage and that kind of whole idea of, how we should be doing that. But sometimes we do need to say to people, because they're like, oh, it's this, it's 2024. My kids have ever said that to me. It's 2024, Dad, right? And we need to say, well, okay, just tell me, how's this dating everybody in your school and being, semi-intimate with half of your classmates at different points? How's that leave you? Is that really working out good for you? Do you feel good at night? Do you feel comfortable and confident and, or are you kind of a wreck at this point because this idea of intimacy isn't too intimate anymore? Sometimes we have to say that out loud because people do feel that, but they never admit it, right? And say, it might be harder to wait and find someone, right? That's not an easy thing either. But on the whole, how much more blessed is that, right? Than the other. All right, read 20 through the end of the chapter, if someone would.
Wisdom calls aloud in the street. She raises her voice in the public squares. At the head of the noisy street, she cries out. In the gateways of the city, she makes her speech. How long will you, simple ones, love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery, and fools hate knowledge? Do not plot harm against your neighbor. who lives trustfully near you. Do not accuse the man for no reason, when he has done you no harm. Do not envy a violent man or choose any of his ways. For the Lord detests a perverse man, but takes the upright into his confidence. The Lord's curse is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the home of the righteous. Oh, did I skip it? Sorry.
I thought you were reading the wrong.
Boy, his translation's different than mine.
It all sounded good, but not quite right.
Okay, let me go back to this.
Okay.
If you had responded to my rebuke, I would have poured out my heart to you and made my thoughts known to you. But since you rejected me when I called, and no one gave heed when I stretched out my hand, since you ignored all my advice and would not accept my rebuke, in turn will laugh at your disaster. I will mock when calamity overtakes you. When calamity overtakes you like a storm, when disaster sweeps over you like a whirlwind, when distress and trouble overwhelm you. Then they will call to me, but I will not answer. They will look for me, but will not find me. Since they hated knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord, since they would not accept my advice and spurn my rebuke, they will eat the fruit of their ways and be filled with the fruit of their schemes. For the waywardness of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. But whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease without fear of harm.
All right, thoughts there.
Sounds like what we just studied in Jeremiah.
Okay.
What he was trying to preach to the people to listen.
Yeah.
They wanted to do it their way.
Right. Yeah.
But yet at the end, when Babylon destroyed Jerusalem, they came to Jeremiah and said, would you ask God to tell us what to do?
Yeah.
And he tells them, and he tells the people, and they still don't believe.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's what I get. Just
Yeah.
jumped right at me. So
Yeah. Right. So yeah, I mean, wisdom calls out, it cries out. And so it's, I mean, this is part of the great tragedy here. And this is not, right, the spirit wisdom here saying, I'm just going to laugh at you because things go wrong. Right? Because it's pretty harsh there in the middle, right? But it's, I told you everything in advance. I told you right where this was going to end up. And you stubbornly said, no, no, no. And so, yeah, there's a holy, I told you so here, right? From Proverbs. And again, sometimes we're we've been taught to be such a overly nice at times people. I mean, we got a lot of crummy people too, but like we're taught that's, being overly nice is kind of the way to be a good person, right? And so sometimes when we read these words, we go, ooh, boy, I don't know if I'd want somebody reading that if that was their first, interaction with God and his word, right? That if you mess up, I'm going to be there laughing at you, right? What was it with terror? I'll mock you when terror strikes. But again, this would be really bad if it's just, well, I knew a bunch of stuff and I didn't tell you, and now I'm going to come mock because your life's falling apart. But no, I led you in this way. And you said no. I mean, led you in the good way, right? And you chose this other way. One other thing to point out here at the very beginning. Well, one, right, we want to get here just for the overall take on Proverbs, right? The wisdom is a lady, right? Ladies, you want to say anything about that? It had to be. No. Yeah. We'll talk about this when we get kind of way to the end, right? Because you kind of get this, if you remember that video last time, right? We start off with this lady wisdom calling out, and we're going to end with this Proverbs 31 woman, right? Who kind of applies every bit of wisdom to her life. And we'll talk more there about this. But the thing I think is even more important here is, right? In the markets, aloud in the street, at the head of noisy streets, at the entrance of the city gates, This is where wisdom is brought. Now here's the question. How do we do that in our day and age? Do we do that, right? Or do we sort of just sit back and say, oh, those people are wrong, and let's keep talking about it here in our church, right? How wrong they are.
Well, not to pick on the people coming over the border,
Okay.
but our nation does so much for them. They walk in the country, they give them a cell phone, they give them this, they give them that, and the people of our own nation have to suffer.
Okay.
They don't. People that are supposed to know don't seem to know who they're supposed to really take care of.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe that sounds awfully negative.
Well, no. Say a little bit more how you get that from here. That's what I'm trying to.
Well, it's just wise people are supposed to be who are leading us.
Okay. Right. Okay. Right.
They don't always lead us in very
Wise ways.
ways.
Right.
Just-
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And there is a sense, right, in which then we want the wisdom of God in our laws, right? This is something we Christians, I'm convinced, we messed up on. People used to say, "Oh, you want to impose, God's ways into our laws," and we'd always say, "No, we don't," and how we sounded was, "No, we're much more concerned with freedom of speech, everything like that, than we are the truth of God's ways." Right? It sounded very good to us. We're just being good Americans here. So we don't want to say, God's ways need to be the ways of the nation. Now, again, we want to be careful how we say this. Why do we want them to be the ways of the nation?
Just by having laws, they're going back to what the Bible taught them, a couple thousand years ago, and they don't even realize it.
Okay, right. So the wisdom of God can sort of be just there in a law that people don't even associate with God, right? And so that's in confirmation, we'll talk about the curbing use of the law, where it kind of just keeps everybody sort of on the right path. I mean, we always know people can jump a curve, right? That's why it's a good analogy. But in general, right, having these laws there helps with that. I think the simplest answer to that question I asked is just, these laws are good. That's why we want them. Right? And they're not good for us. This is the accusation usually, is you want those laws to look like what you believe for your benefit or for your church's benefit. No. We want those laws that way because we believe they're good for all people. Right? Today we're going to talk about in the sermon, we'll kind of, turn there, the Sabbath. Right? And this is an interesting one in the Bible. Right? Probably out of all the 10 commandments, we go along and we kind of, we may need to spend time, right, thinking through what all it applies to, but we kind of go, okay, don't steal. Yep, I see how that applies to my life, right? The Sabbath is this weird one, right, where I'm going to suggest either, we just kind of oversimplify it and say, it just means go to church, right? Or when we get into the others, then we get into all these things. Well, do we have to keep the Sabbath on the Sabbath? Well, no, right? And we get into all these details of Old Testament Sabbath law. What did it mean? What happened? All these different things, right? And again, one of the things I'm going to suggest we need to contend for is Sabbath is good, right? And it's not just good for Christians to gather in the house of the Lord. Sabbath is good because all of God's creatures need rest. Right? But that's an example of how we can say before our world, we don't want this. And I'll quote this Supreme Court justice in the sermon, who there were these, they call them blue laws, which were the laws that said you can't be open on a Sunday or whatever. And when we had that, this one Supreme Court justice, basically made the case for why those could stand. And he said, you're right. If this is just a call for religious worship, the state has no business, again, from an American perspective, constitutional perspective, has no business saying you need to go to church on Sunday, right? That's not the government's job in that sense. But he said, if this is just a call to rest one day a week, boy, would that be good for society. And that's how they upheld those laws. That was in the 1960s. Now most of them have went bye-bye. So, all right. So anyways, but I think the last thing here just to say with wisdom, right? Calling out is, again, it's done very publicly. We need to be looking for more ways to bring God's wisdom out into the streets, so to speak. And there's always this thing. God always offers us his spirit, his wisdom. But again, if we say no, or if people say no, it is going to lead to destruction, right? If they don't choose the fear of the Lord, they don't listen to the counsel, they're going to, right? The simple are killed by their turning away. Right? Hard word, but true. Yeah.
What you were saying about the Sabbath, those are ill-gotten gains, those people being open and not taking a day to
Oh,
rest.
all right.
You know, for
I'll leave
everything.
that thought for you there with Doug. That's good. That's good. I mean, that it is the kind of thing here that we do need to think about, right? Again, that's the thing. Yeah, what if I'm making some gain because I'm ignoring God's commandments? What does that mean, right? Yeah. Okay. Did someone write me a note up here? Or was that from a long time ago and I never got it? I just,
from
but it was today?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I just want sorry, I just saw it and I was like, is that from a long time ago or do I? It's kind of hard to read on there, so I'll figure it out. All right, let's close with a word of prayer. Dear Lord God, we do thank and praise you for the wisdom of your word. We thank you that we have heard the call, and yet we're also tempted at times to walk away from wisdom, God. Keep us from that and help us to bring your wisdom out into the streets and the marketplaces and offer it to all people. We ask this in Christ's holy name. Hello?
Now, you'll be gone the next 2 weeks.
Oh, yes, I'm gone the next 2 weeks. Doug's on. You know what you're teaching?
Now, next week I'm gonna teach on French.
Friendship next week. Hey, that sounds interesting.
Unfortunately, I will not be able to Sabbath holy next week.
Right.
In the emergency department. So,
I
You
thought
get the
about
water or the coffee? Oh, just water.
I thought about doing something on Father's Day, because I'm gonna be on Father's
Oh,